So this is, someone wanted brutally honest reviews. There may be a few typos as it's been written on my phone on my commute home. Please give any and all feedback. I know where the chapter is going, but I wanted feedback before writing more tomorrow. Yeah, and I've contacted them and they say it's okay to stream it. So it isn't that long, so I'm going to read through it. Icy gusts stung Farron's exposed face as he trudged through the snow towards Var Cole's tent. Ahead, the Var's large blue tent shivered in the wind, as did the two poor guards posted outside. "What are you doing out in this blizzard, boy?" one of them called over the wind. "I'm Lyric's son. I was told to..." Before Farron could finish, they slid apart and gestured him through. Farron was always impressed by the sway his father's name held in their camp. Parting the entrance with one hand, he awaited the warm and silent shelter the yak-skin tents were famous for. He was met by the heat of the fire as expected, but also by an unruly flurry of voices. "You're a fool, Cole, a damned fool," barked an animated man near the central brazier. "It won't work. It'll never work. We're nomads. You can't survive on the tundra staying in one place," decried another. A somewhat calmer figure who had been nursing a goblet of wine now chimes in. "You expect us to give up our way of life and live like those Westerners?" Through this, Var Cole had sat patiently and quietly, waiting for their men to finish their tirades. "I see no other way, Gorick. As I said, the decision has been made." His voice calm yet strong, unwavering. "My clan will move to the Ceylon Pass, and there we will set up the outpost. There is less and less to hunt. The blizzards seemingly grow stronger every year, and we haven't found a firestone deposit in months." His retort was met with murmurs and words under breath. As the squabbling continued, Farron couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. A settlement on the tundra? Spotting his father on the far side of the tent, he began to skirt around toward him, hoping he could explain the situation more. This was when he noticed a tall, broad figure perched on a table before him. Although hooded and wrapped in cloaks, the glow of the brazier danced over him, revealing him from the darkness. His build, along with his tanned skin and dark hair, made it clear he wasn't from the tundra. He was from the west. The hooded figure noticed Farron, but only spent a fleeting glance on him, seemingly more interested in the chaos unfolding around the brazier. Farron timidly passed the towering figure and approached his father. "What in freezing hell is happening?" whispered Farron. His father dismissed his question, returning one of his own instead. "Did you bring what I asked?" "Yes, the package from your tent." With this, Farron retrieved the small paper-wrapped package from within his fur cloak. His father took it from him and strode towards a nearby desk, where he began rummaging through drawers and boxes. "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" Farron continued. Accelerating his search, he replied. As Farron joined his father's quest for the elusive wax, the voices around the fire began to rise. Several of the men had risen to their feet and were facing off, shouting and shoving whilst Var Cole sat with his head in his hands. "Enough!" Var Cole's fiery voice bellowed as he flew to his feet, freezing the men where they stood. "Today was a courtesy. I had hoped to keep us united through this transition. With regret, I must say, if you don't wish to be a part of this future, please leave now." One by one, several of the figures began to thaw from their frozen state. Some stormed out, others slipped out. A few stayed, taking seats around the brazier, anxiously waiting Var Cole's next words. The hooded man now joined the remaining men around the fire, slipping his hood down and unleashing his wild black hair. "I expected it from Gorick, stubborn bastard, but not the others." Var Cole slid back into his chair and began to drown his troubles in wine. Finally, Derek cried. Apparently oblivious to the scenes unfolding just behind him, he had found some wax. Grabbing a candle from the desk, he now hurried to Varkal. Bemused, Farron slowly moved to join the rest of the tent's occupants, enjoying the warmth of the brazier. I think it's a cool opening scene. It seems like an accord is about to be made, and an adventure to the Ceylon Pass will begin, which is cool. So yeah, again, this was from someone who's kind of new to writing, I believe, and wanted like lots of feedback to help them continue writing. So because this changes to a different speaker, normally one paragraph will be about one thing, but if it's a different speaker, then it's about another thing. It like changes. So it's kind of assumed that this is the same speaker because it's in the same paragraph. So it's usually a good idea to start a new paragraph when someone new speaks. This is new dialogue, so I'd probably have that new paragraph from Called Over the Wind. Seemingly more interested in the chaos unfolding around the brazier, Farron timidly passed the towering figure and approached his father. So again, he's like changing. The flow of this scene is changing because he's now, instead of being stopped and focusing on this other guy, he's continuing. That's actually part of this sentence as well, because it's not the beginning of a new sentence. Or maybe it's his own sentence. It doesn't really say he said or anything. So let's go with that. So you say before Farron could finish, that's what this is doing already. And if you do that, it's like a wider dash. I tend to use that anyway. That indicates that he stopped talking in the middle of it. And the next thing is why they stopped talking. So you could just say the guards slid apart. The tag talking about the person speaking, it's usually better to get that in earlier than later, because like in this case it doesn't make too much difference. But if this was like yelled the Hobbit or something, or yelled Frank, then we don't know who is saying this and how they're saying it until right at the end. So then you'd want that to be, it won't work, it will never work, yelled Frank, we're nomads, and so on. And then this whole thing, from yelled Frank kind of colours what came right before it, because it's part of that dialogue line, like that. And then it will also colour the rest of it, because we don't describe Frank's demeanour changing. We say he paused, took a breath, and mumbled. Oh, continued mumbling. And then Frank's demeanour would change, and now we hear the next dialogue as mumbling. Alternatively, you could do even better, if this is kind of important, to put it at the start. I usually use this for like Frank whispered. That's how you spell whispered. No, it's not. That's how you spell whispered. Frank whispered under his breath, because that's quite a difference from speaking aloud. And if it's like a situation in which there's a reason for Frank whispering under his breath, like they don't want to be noticed or something, then it's good for the reader to know that before they imagine how Frank is saying it won't work, it will never work. Yeah, in this case it's just decried another, so I just move that to here. Won't work, it'll never work, decried another. We're nomads. Yeah. And then that would be a full stop. But then it kind of changes tack to not talking about the Salem Pass, but talking about here. Because if there's less to hunt in the Salem Pass, why are they going there? So I'd probably have some east side. Oh, there's less to hunt here. Seemingly grow stronger. Makes it less powerful, so just the blizzards grow stronger. Would be fine and be more powerful. He'd be more certain saying it like this. His retorts. This sounds like a bit of a said bookism, which is a term in writing where, so you have like, hey, Frank said. Hey, Frank expounded. Classic one is in like older books. You have stuff like, hey, Frank ejaculated, because that's another term for words being spoken. But it's like very old and it sounds really weird. It kind of draws attention to itself quite a bit. So does expounded and things, which like, it's hard to tell what that even means, and does that actually add anything to the speech? If it was yelled or mumbled or something, that would work because it's describing the physical sound of them speaking this dialogue, as opposed to just they're saying some stuff. But something like replied also tends to not be necessary because it's like, hey, Jean said. Hey, Frank replied. We know he's replying because he's saying it after someone else is saying something. So it could just be said as well. If it was a question, like questioned or asked, we already know it's a question and he's asking it. Things like that. So most of the time said is perfectly fine, rather than using kind of synonyms for it. So this retort thing sounds a lot like a synonym as opposed to something that's that descriptive. Okay, so there's also this. Exposed face, so you trudge towards the snow towards Varkol's tent. So the tent is already mentioned, and then it's changed to a large blue tent, which is kind of like, it being large and blue doesn't really matter to this sentence, but it does kind of matter to this sentence because this is the first time the reader has seen the tent. So they're creating an image of what the tent looks like in their brains. So large blue should be part of the reader imagining this tent for the first time. Otherwise, so the problem is, if it's like this, then they imagine a tent and I imagined like just a plain white tent. And then I had to change it to a large blue tent. Like I imagine a small white tent because it's like a one-man tent is what I was imagining. Then changed it to a large blue tent, so I had to go back to what I understand so far and rewrite it in my imagination to be large and blue. So if that was there, then the first time I hear about it, I imagine a large blue tent. However, it doesn't really matter that it's large and blue to that sentence. So currently we have icy gusts, exposed face, trudging through the snow, and the large blue tent. As like things we learn about. Yeah. So there's quite a lot in the first sentence, which is kind of, it doesn't read too badly, apart from this large blue tent thing, because we don't really care about the description of a tent. There's so much other stuff already going on. So maybe he just trudges through the snow. and then we introduce the tent. So actually you already have like this here. So I had the vase large blue tent shivered in the wind. It's probably fine. We have something focused on what Farron's doing and what Farron's experiencing, and then some layout of the scene. In front of him there's a large blue tent, and there's guards outside it. The guards slid apart. Okay, so we didn't actually establish that they were together and blocking the way. To find him suspiciously. Yeah, so standing at the entrance, and then they slid apart. So now it's clear why they slid apart, because they weren't slid apart before. The entrance. So an entrance normally has a door. In my mind. So in my mind, I was imagining a door. But if you say like the entrance flap or something, then it makes sense he's opening it with one hand, and it's part of this cloth tent. Through this, Varkol had sat patiently and quietly waiting for the men to finish his tirades. And he's still sitting patiently and quietly and not speaking when this dialogue happens, because we're not told that anything changed. So it was unclear to me whether this was like a different person speaking. So it could be better. So this is a cool framing of like how Varkol is feeling about all this stuff. And it kind of sets the scene of Varkol being there, and maybe I imagine him being at the head of the table or something like that. But I'd want that to be as soon as you get into the thing. And yeah, so you could put it like here, or because this guy is talking to Cole directly, it would be a good time for Farron to glance at Cole to see his reaction to this kind of disrespect, I guess. So Farron ahead of the table. Varkol sat patiently quietly waiting for the men. And then the tirades come. Cole stirred. I see no other way, Gorick. As I said, the decision has been made. Yeah, it's not very clear, like the blocking, the layout of this area. So he's moving, skirting around something, but then suddenly there's a table in front of him. I imagined him going like running outside of this tent, where there wouldn't be. It would be strange for a table to be just in my head. So it wasn't clear that there are multiple tables. I thought there was just one big table. I don't know why, but that was in my head. So again, this is why I want to frame stuff so that we kind of nail down from infinite possibilities. There's only very few possibilities of what the layout could be, and then we can use that layout in our descriptions and stuff to make it feel more real. So earlier around here somewhere. So not the head of the table. That's at the other end of the dining halls type of thing, but that sounds weird for these nomad types. It sounds more like an army base, but I'll just leave it as dining hall. To be changed later. And then the dining hall just indicates that there are multiple tables, because that's how dining halls work. And then we can rely on that. Yeah, and then instead of it being in front of him, it still feels like skirting around means he's going down the side where there are no, like, if there were tables in the way, he wouldn't be going down the side. Maybe just ahead, which might be what it was in the first place. Maybe next to a brazier ahead. On a table. And then it doesn't matter where the table is, the brazier is ahead in some way, and then the table is next to it somehow. But I want to kind of know, what is Lerick doing? And where is he? There's no blocking or layout or anything. It just says approach his father. But is he like sitting at the same table, or another table further on? Is he sitting at the chief's right hand or something? It's unclear. And what does Lerick look like? Things like that. Just a little introduction to this new area. And when it's met with rumours and words under breath, we know that that's happening right after he said this, because that's when we read it. So we could just say it happening, and now it's happening, and I think an important thing to think about is letting the reader figure stuff out for themselves. Don't tell them that it's in response to his retort or the thing he said, but just show the thing that happens. And we as human beings, if we were in this situation and this thing was said and then this thing happened, we would interpret that to be linked in some way, and interpret like how the people that are murmuring feel about what was just said and all this kind of stuff. So just showing that instead of telling us like the conclusion to draw means we can use that means the reader has to use their own like real world experience of interacting with people to understand what's going on, and so it's engaging the brain much more immersively there. To understand what's going on, they have to be in the scene, they have to feel themselves in this tent with these people, and they have to just it's like they're really there. So just showing stuff is a lot more powerful for the reader. Yeah, an animated man doesn't actually describe what we see. It's like telling us we should conclude that that man is animated. But how do we do that in real life? We do that by seeing the man gesturing and stuff. So barked a man gesturing wildly near the central brazier. And he noticed, if we're hearing about it, because this is written in third person limited, which means we're not hearing other people's thoughts, but we're just hearing Farron's thoughts. He's the perspective character, or the viewpoint character. Then we know that he noticed it because we're learning about it. So we could just say, a tall, broad figure perched on a table before him. The use of now, I try to not use it too much. I still use it sometimes, but if the reader is reading it, then it's happening now in their heads. So saying something is happening now tends to not be actually that useful. Something like this was when. We know when this happened because we are reading it right now. It's happening now. So we don't need that. We don't need with this because we know that it's happening now because it's happening now. And we don't need now because it's happening now. He hurried over with our call. He awaited the warm and silent shelter. I don't know what, yeah. Okay, like compared to the wind? So it seemed odd that it would be a silent shelter because there could be people in there. But I think just like it's the wind sounds are dampened So like, so I'd change that somehow to be more clearer on that. Plus this is like the big head honcho's tent, so it's probably going to be loud most of the time. He awaited the warmth and then was met by the heat of the fire, as expected. And we expect it already, so it feels like there's not a lot of point doing this twice, awaiting the warmth and heat of the fire. So I'd probably just take that out because he's already going into the tent, so he should, anything we hear about him sensing is inside the tent. So the heat of the fire, his cheeks, because it mentioned it stung his face. Now it's like warming his face, and you don't need as expected. And I changed it to, but the usual respite from the constant wailing wind was overcome by an unruly flurry of voices. Yeah, and then that indicates like the difference, and we don't need this silent shelter. Oh, as the squabbling continued. But they're murmuring and words under breath, but then they're squabbling as well somehow. So, old man. The squabbling continued. So, like, to change tack from the murmurs, something happens, more specifically. So, like, then an old man yelled something unpleasant, and the squabbling continued. I'd probably do a hyphen there because people read from beginning to end, so and they want to know what it is, and now they have a description. It's something small, and it's something made out of paper. But now it's not made out of paper; it's wrapped in paper, and now it's a package wrapped in paper. So like at this moment here, the reader changes what they're even understanding from this sentence. So it's pretty low level and not hugely disruptive, but it's minorly disruptive, even if they don't notice it. But if it had that, then it would be, we're talking about an object, the object is small, the object is paper wrapped. It's a package that is paper wrapped, that is small. Anyway, that's kind of how I think about kind of flow in line editing, is what is really going on at this kind of low level in the reader's brain. Yeah, what does accelerating his search look like? I'd probably just have that. And then an action showing that acceleration of searching. So, father said, pulling out entire drawers. Pulling out entire drawers and moving their contents around with both hands. Maybe shuffling contents around, and that indicates he's intensifying. Searching intensifies. Began to rise. Several of the men had risen. So maybe Farron looked over the hall, which isn't a hall, to see. So this is how we know, because Farron, at this point, Farron is still looking at stuff over here, so he wouldn't see men rising to their feet. So we've got to say that he changed his focus. Oh, this could be a cool, yeah. So maybe the reason he changed focus is this. Yeah. So put this up here somewhere. So instead of began to rise, we could say the voices grew louder and louder. And then the foot of his feet, all this stuff is apparent just from what Farron sees. So Farron Var was standing now. And I'm saying now because this isn't the moment it's happening, but the situation has changed since before, so now the situation is different. And then rose where they stood. And where were they standing? They were facing off and shoving. And shoving, so maybe I'll just tweak that to thumb grabbing at the clothing or neck of others. So it's like a fight's was about to break out. And that's the end of that scene. So I whittled on for a long time about that, but you know, so hopefully they can glean some tips from this stream, and I'll send it over to them. And thanks for watching. I'll probably be streaming it again tomorrow. I'm trying to do it kind of daily, on weekdays at least. And if you are a writer and would like me to discuss a topic or expand on some principle I talked about, just let me know in the chat or in a DM. Or if you have like some writing you'd like me to edit on stream, you can get in touch with me through DMs as well. So that's about it. Thanks everyone. I'll see you around.